Thank you, and good evening, everybody. I appreciate very much coming to Lebanon and having the chance to get some ideas of this very complex society that doesn't resemble much my own country, Norway, which is luckily situated at the periphery of almost everything. I was asked to, it's not loud enough?
No, it's better.
Okay, like this?
That's great.
Yeah. Okay, I shall try. I was asked to say something about the civil society's role in relation to the independence of the judiciary from a Norwegian perspective. Well, the Norwegian perspective is, in this regard, is not very, let's say, it's not very concrete, because actually we are living in a country where there has never been any problem with political interference in the judiciary. And so the civil society, they have not had a focus on this as a problem. So I will try to say something about how the civil society in Norway functions as a means of creating general confidence in the state powers here under the judiciary. And this confidence is, in my opinion, to sort of give this confidence is absolutely necessary also to bring about an independent judiciary. So let me start also saying that I've listened to yesterday and today I've listened to President of the State Council, to the President of the High Judicial Council, and to the General Director of the Ministry of Justice. And they have been speaking about, as far as I've understood it, they have somewhat different opinions as to the role of the civil society in this question. So I'd like to point out that there shouldn't be very much doubt about the role of civil society. The civil society, of course, has as a main task to monitor the status of human rights in the society and the functioning of state powers as protectors of human rights. And they also, of course, within this task, they are not only monitoring the situation, but they are also it's also their obligation to criticize state powers. Here under the judiciary, of course, if they deviate from this task of protecting such values. And I think I would say that in a certain way, the way the state powers and institutions are welcoming this criticism and monitoring of the civil society. This reflects the democratic rule of law level in the society. So there is a huge difference between, for example, Norway, which is welcoming very much the interference of the civil society, that is the monitoring, etc. And Russia, for example, we heard that in Russia in 2012 they passed a law that obliged the civil society, NGOs, in the human rights field, they obliged them to register as foreign agents, and when this very vibrant Russian civil society, when it protested and sabotaged this, then there were taken legal actions against them. And they defended them, saying that the law was unconstitutional, contravened the human rights conventions and so on, but it was upheld by the non-independent Russian courts. This tells you that, in my opinion, this tells you that really it's hard to exaggerate the importance of the civil society in countries which are in most all countries, even if they are not visible so much in this question as in Norway. But it tells you that the Russians, they felt threatened by the activity of this very vibrant civil society, so they tried to delegitimize it. Of course, in a totalitarian affected regime, you cannot have an independent judiciary. But there are also there are also problems with independence within established democracies, because there are tensions involved here. Tensions is other problems, and the tensions I refer to are the tensions between the primary tasks of the judiciary in relation to other state powers. They shall, on the one hand, enforce decisions by these powers, and on the other hand, they shall control these decisions according to constitutional law and human rights law, etc. And this creates a constant, latent or open tension, which we have seen augmenting in later years because of the very active dynamics of the courts of the European Union and the human rights courts in Strasbourg. We've seen this in Europe, and this has procured, this tension. Every now and again, of course, the judiciary is criticized for being too activist. But in later years, we have seen very vehement attacks on the judiciary. First and foremost, we've seen it in Italy by Berlusconi and his continuous attacks on a very courageous Italian judiciary. But we see it in a reasonable form in more countries, also in Norway, that there are criticism of a too activist judiciary. So the tension between enforcement and control implies that the judiciary must find a balance between the two, based on the consciousness and that the functional democracy depends not only on the relation, on the confident relation between the state powers, but also the confidence of the general public. You have to have a vertical confidence between state powers and the public, and then you have to have horizontal confidence between groups and minorities within the public. Such confidence is, so to say, the glue of a functional democracy. And this confidence will hardly welcome an activist judiciary, but trust in political powers as administrators of the common good is also dependent on these powers being effectively controlled by independent courts. So, what has been pointed to by many as a main characteristic of the Nordic countries, here under Norway, is the high level of confidence within all these levels of society. And civil society has played a very important role in establishing this more general confidence. I must say that I think this is a very crucial point in a country like Lebanon, and it's not easy to see how you go about the task of creating this sort of this confidence which a functional democracy depends on. I have understood that, I mean, the representation of different confessions at all levels of society is a kind of coping with this confidence question. I actually don't know. We have heard now throughout these days that some seems don't to think it's a good idea that this should penetrate, for example, to all levels down in society. I don't know about that. I only know that this is a very important issue that should be very much be discussed, not least in this project. Well, I said that Norway's the confidence in Norway is we must say exceptionally good, thanks to, of course, Norway being an homogeneous country, etc., with little political strife and so on. And the role of civil society in this is not unimportant, because today it's a very vibrant civil society consisting of numerous groups on all levels, national levels, local levels, community levels, and so on. And they have traditions dating from the 19th century, when very many of the tasks of the government and the parliament today was taken care of by civil society, health, education, even infrastructure, everything almost. You can say that there has been a development for social engagement, which is a living reality in Norway. And today, in the post-World War II area, this engagement has been expanded. There's been an extension towards international solidarity and so on. And for example, I'm connected to the International Commission of Jurists, the Norwegian section, which was created a couple of years ago, and we are getting quite some government support for conducting projects in Russia to enhance the independence of the judiciary and to include training for trial observers, etc. And there are many similar projects. So this also tells you that the state is very welcoming and active. Is very welcoming and active civil society, and there are it's reflected in the extensive economic support schemes by the state. About 80 different support schemes are administered to manifold of organizations. So someone may ask a question about if this may have undue repercussions on their civil society's independence, but by and large it's very well accepted, and it's makes it possible to do quite a lot of good work for a civil society where you cannot, which is a small country like Lebanon, and where it's hard nowadays at least to base activity only on voluntary work by dedicated people. And civil society's activities should be seen in connection with the natural allies, the media, and other institutions in the human rights field, academics, scholars, ombudsmen, etc. And these are all taking part also in human rights activities abroad. But even if Nordic countries probably could be regarded as a kind of advanced avant-garde of the international human rights community, it doesn't say that we don't have many challenges in Norway. Indeed, we have regarding pre-trial detention. We get criticized by international treaty parties for sort of for even using torture by the detention methods we apply. And there are many other fields also where we get criticized. The field which poses the biggest and steadily increasing challenges is the treatment of asylum seekers and refugees. And here these civil society groups are extremely effective and are monitoring and disclosing violations and morally untenable practices. And the Norwegian Bar Association has created a pro bono group that has tried more than 100 expulsion decisions in courts and has succeeded in having more than 60 of them overturned. One question that I would that is a problem in Norway is that to get an efficient civil society as a whole, you have some kind of coordination and cooperation between the different groups. And in Norway we have something called the NGO Forum, which is such a forum where you make, for example, shadow reports for the human rights councils, periodic reviews, etc. But they are also occupying themselves with concrete cases regarding all kinds, all fields within the human rights sector. To enhance the efficiency of civil society as a whole is not least of interest in societies where you see endeavors to control civil societies. I think that the telling example is when I last year went to Guatemala. There is an obligatory membership for judges in the Bar Association. So when the power elements of that country dislike that the judge, that the female, very courageous judge, sentenced the former president to Dios Monte 30 years imprisonment for genocide. This Bar Association saw to it, their honorary board saw to it, that she was expelled for judicial misconduct, with the consequence that she was disbenched. Luckily, this was overturned by the Constitutional Court later on, but it tells you that what may happen when power elements infiltrate the civil society organizations. And the Bar Association is in general very susceptible to such infiltrations. have such coordination is, in my opinion, also very important because civil society, according to international standards, civil society should have an important role in institutions that are responsible for the appointment and promotion of judges and holding judges accountable, disciplining and dismissing them, which are crucial elements in securing independence. And it's not satisfactory that representatives formed from civil society in such council is nominated by state authorities. They should be nominated by the civil society itself. So there has to be some kind of body that may elect or nominate the representatives in these bodies. Of course, when it comes to this goes for both the appointing institutions like high judicial council, for example, there, and goes for bodies holding judges accountable for disciplining and dismissing them. Because particularly disciplining these disciplining judges is used as a measure of sanctioning them for decisions that are disliked by other elements of society. And they should have a very strong support within such bodies. And this support, civil society must play a role in supporting them within such bodies, like disciplining and dismissing bodies. Yeah, I said that the rule of law in democratic society is dependent on the confidence in the society, and within state powers and confidence of the public at large. Actually, in many old democracies, where the judiciary has functioned quite satisfactorily and independently, it has not been due to extensive formal constitutional or international safeguards. It has developed as an element of a societal and cultural tradition accepted by the society at large. And this means that the balance that is necessary for confidence, first and foremost, is dependent on the mindset within the judiciary and other state powers, and on the awareness of the values and tensions involved. And therefore, when this mindset is absent, it's very hard to bring about an independent judiciary, even if society is not lacking in formal safeguards, which you can see, for example, in Russia, where the formal safeguards within constitution and laws, they are not that bad, but they are not functioning independently because the mindset of the judges is the problem. So that was why today we heard, for example, the General Director of the Ministry of Justice. She said that, I don't know if it's a good idea, but she said that you have to start with the judges, and they must sort of internalize the importance of being independent. That is to, you understand what I mean? It's to sort of internalize the moral and pride of being independent judges. But to bring this about, Of course, they need some kind of help, protection within the formal rules. Let me finish by saying that even established liberal law democracies, they are not one once and for all. There are always illiberal elements at work, and not least in our days, when particularly the war on terror threatens the traditional balance between security and freedom, and high pressure is exerted on from everywhere to accept a steadily increasing flow of surveillance and other harsh measures. And by this and other malign consequences of the war on terror, the Western democracies, which has been leading in this field towards independence of the judiciary, they have been losing what they call soft power, which is moral high ground, if you like. And in some democracies, in some transitional societies, we see the emergence of new illiberal democracies with a facade that systematically weakens institutional control mechanisms and makes it more difficult to change the power structure of the society. This we see in Russia, we see it in Turkey, and we also see the tendency within the EU, in Hungary, for example. In Egypt, the military has re-established its absolute power. So, to end this, the independence of the judiciary needs a continuous and staunch defense, and not least from